Good morning. This is Carl Dakin, and this is the Successful Funding Show. With me today is Michael Feely with Citizen Sports, with whom I'm working on a variety of projects targeting the, I'll call it the financial sustainability of youth sports programs. This is an area of keen interest to anyone who has kids in sports, and it's impacting everything all the way up to the professional leagues and their ability to put talent on the field that's worth watching. With that, uh, the Successful Funding Show is here to share information about funding. We're going to talk about different ways that funding may be accomplished or created, particularly in connection with youth sports, but we'll also talk a little bit about pro sports, and we'll move forward. So, good morning, Michael. Michael's is on the road today, and here he is. I'm going to delete this one.
Sorry about that. Lost connection.
It's quite all right. All of us who live on the road, with the road, for the road, moving back and forth between face-to-face meetings and calls like this, we're all very used to dealing with the fact that technology is not quite up to the degree we would like. But as I was saying, while you were reasserting your telepresence here, we're going to be talking about youth sports. We're going to be talking about funding of youth sports and how things are changing, which is going to impact all sports everywhere, all the way up to the pro level. And with that, um, uh, we've seen a lot of things happen since COVID, and one of the things of concern has been that the cost to a family to have a child play in a single sport has gone up 46% over the last 5 years. And without needing to put any additional statistics on the table, income of those families has not gone up 46% over the same time. And this is putting stress on the families. And more importantly, it's causing a lot of families to bow out, to not be able to allow their kids to participate. And this, of course, is at the lower income levels, single parent families, families lower income, and it's going to cause all kinds of issues just for those families. But in the long haul, it also is going to deprive youth sports of talent. And that talent is the source of future professional players who we all like to watch on TV or games and so forth. And if that talent pool is depleted, diminished over time, we're going to see less and less quality play at the professional level. And that dips into our being a fan, our watching sports, and things of that nature. So with that, I'm working with Michael, as I said, on a number of projects, trying to figure out how do we rewrite the playbook? How do we bring new funding to youth sports? What can we do to move that forward? And Michael and I are working together on the design development of a new sports ecosystem that is intended to make this, the presentation, the performance of youth sports programs, a sustainable business. Even though it will be a combination of both for-profit and amateur sports, nonetheless, we're seeing professionalism now dip down into lower and lower levels of the sport. And with the NCAA lawsuit settlement last week, we're now seeing potential threats to sports in clubs, high schools, and colleges as the impact of that is felt. So, Michael, good morning. Thanks for being with us. And Please share a little bit about your background and experience in working with sports at all levels, so that people have a better idea of where we're coming from on this discussion.
Morning, Carl. Thanks for having me. Apologies about the technology. My background is in sports development. I think I said it last time, but I went to the University of East London in Stratford, basically right next to the Olympics, and essentially studied the Olympics, whether that was governmental policy and practice for mega events, or all the way down to sort of the nuts and bolts of grassroots programming, and everything in between. I was pursuing a career as a rugby coach. Spent a lot of time coaching women's team in Canada and in the US, originally from London in the UK. But also when I left, when the main thing about my degree, they talk about legacy impact for the Olympic Games. So when they pick a host city, what do you leave behind? What's the legacy? And so I've always kind of had that question in the back of my mind, where if you need to leave something behind, then it has to have an exit strategy that therefore makes the programming sustainable once you've extracted yourself. So sort of over the then sort of following 10 or 15 years, whilst working in sport, working with different rugby programs, community sports programs, events, operations, stuff like that, it's always been a case of sort of learning more about revenue streams, trying to qualify and quantify what comes in where, how the money flows within the ecosystem that currently exists, and ultimately determine that it was an extractive model, and essentially it's being strip mined at every step, from sort of pee-wee football all the way up to professional sport. And look, for profit, I've got no issue with people making money. That's the incentive to be involved, so that's fine. It's just, are we extracting too much at certain stages or all stages, and what's the sort of feedback loop to continue to grow the base? So when you talk about a sports development pyramid, typically that's sort of the grassroots to gold medals. At the very, very top is the elite international competition, professional competition, etc. I determine that we're narrowing the base continually to raise the top higher, and eventually you end up with a very slim tower, and then you start robbing from the bottom of the tower. So if anyone that's ever played Jenga, that ultimately ends in collapse. So rather than continue that sort of extractive cycle, that extractive process, how can we have a regenerative process that raises the base, widens the base of the pyramid, in order to sustainably and stably raise the top of the pyramid? Just sort of an aside to that, if you look at long-term athlete development theory, LTAD, anyone that's interested in sports would have heard of that. Ultimately, before it's a talent development model, it's an economic model, because it determines where time, money, and effort goes. And if it's determining where you're spending the money and how you're spending the money before it's ever declared or determined that someone is talented enough to be professional, then it's an economic model before it's a talent model. And ultimately that's what's creating this Jenga effect. So I've spent a number of years trying to work out how to sort of turn it on its head, really, rather than just simply raise the tip of the pyramid for its own sake, but how to widen the base in order to raise the tip of the pyramid stably and sustainably, like I said. And that's about it in a nutshell, really.
Yeah. So Michael and I have talked about what we call the extractive nature of most sports systems, and maybe put a different look or spin on that, is that if a pro team wants to hire so many players to put on the field for whatever sport they're offering, they have to have somebody who can play the sport at the highest level. Otherwise, you will have imbalances within a sport, which we've seen in a number of different sports, from baseball to football to basketball and so forth. And the fans do not find it entertaining when their hometown team, like we have currently with the Rockies here in Denver, is at the bottom of the league and losing week after week because it's being outspent 10-1 by their Western League rival, the Dodgers. Where at the current time, the Rockies are doing so bad that it's not even really a rivalry. It's come to town, take your beating, and go home again. Um, and so what has happened in the major sports is that they look to colleges to have their own sports programs. The colleges basically train up the athletes to a level of talent. They provide a broad enough participation that the good and best talent will surface and go on to play in the pros. What's happened, though, with the recent professionalism or converting collegiate sports to pro levels is going to have a serious impact on many sports. So, if you were not aware, last week, the NCAA, which is the organizer of collegiate sports, um, basically settled a lawsuit and paid $20 billion into a pool to compensate former college players who had never been paid to perform on behalf of their colleges, and then entered into a structure where each college will have a cap of about $20 million that they can distribute as paydays to selected athletes within their programs. And to this extent, this all sounds well if you think that they're going to distribute the money democratically, evenly across all sports and all players, then you would be wrong. Right now, it's anticipated that 75 to 85% of the money that a university will distribute to its players will go into football, leaving only 15 to 25% for all other sports. And that includes the major sports of basketball and possibly soccer. But all the other sports are at risk that their entire funding may be cut. And this goes from golf to tennis to volleyball, lacrosse, all the other sports that are not primary TV viewership candidates. And the question then becomes, well, where's the money going to come from into the colleges to pay for this? And right now, there aren't a lot of potential answers on the table. In the secondary sports, the ones that aren't the big three, football, basketball, and soccer, they've always struggled for funding. But some of these programs have been supported by federal mandates, like Title IX, that says that a men's sport, if they spend so much money on it, there has to be a reasonably equivalent amount of money spent on women's sports. And this new funding thing that has been dropped on everybody is raising the question whether there will be any money into men's sports that has to be matched at the for women and female sports. We don't know, but it's quite likely that this will disappear, and the whole purpose of Title IX is going to have to be looked at again or restructured, or we're not going to see anything. Then what we've also seen now, because of the professionalism of college sport, that we're seeing this dip down into the club levels, high school, play outside of high school, interscholastic sports, but at the club level, where if you're one of the leading players, they may waive your player fees. And what this does means that all the other players in the club are subsidizing the top players by the payment of fees. And all this is being borne by the families. And then with this increase in cost over the last several years post-COVID, what we're seeing is only the wealthier families can afford to continue to keep their kids in sports, and the those families who cannot afford it are dropping out. And therein is a major problem at so many levels that all kids, although not entitled, we would like to see as many kids as possible participate in youth sports and benefit from the athleticism, the health aspects, the teamwork, everything that goes into that. And there isn't clear answers on the table. So, starting with that, Michael, what do you see are the key issues why youth sports are going up in cost, and what's driving that?
Um, well, there's a couple things to unpack in that. Some of that will be I'll come back to in terms of what you said about Title IX. But if you look at pre-COVID, say 2016, 2017, youth sport collectively in the US, that's all sports for all youth, generated around 12 billion in annual revenue. Now, I think last year it generated somewhere in the region of 18 or 19 billion. It surpassed the NFL. So youth sport collectively is a larger industry than the National Football League, which is the most successful revenue generating sports league competition company in the world. Aside from something like the FIFA World Cup, you understand what I mean. If youth obesity and associated health risks issues are increasing, yet and as a result of participation dropping, and yet the revenue is increasing, that's simply evidenced by the data that, well, it's gone up 46%. So people are now paying 1.5 times as much as they were pre-COVID. To some extent, that's a bubble. Or to a large extent, that's a bubble that's inflating, and at some point that will burst. When they track sort of participation rates in boys and girls, they talk about 75% of young men are participating in team sports, competitive sports. What they don't really tell you when you critically analyze it is that, say there's 4 boys and 3 of them don't play any sport, but 1 of them plays 3 sports. That's 3 sports per 4. That's a 75% participation rate. So there's ways to fudge the numbers, make it look good, be inaccurate, to sort of justify the existence. But then also, that's only challenging that one set of pockets. So it's the same family, the same parents. So that's partly why the cost has increased, because most of the market or potential market is now capped out of it. The relationship between youth sports and high school, if you start off in a elementary school age club program, and you want to work your way up through middle school into high school, the American model is basically junior varsity, varsity, collegiate, pro. Those are the layers to the pyramid. That's the pathway. On the one hand, the NFL is so successful because they're not responsible for any of the levels below it. They simply cherry pick the best product, repackage it, and sell it. So it's a branding exercise in that sense. It's not necessarily a sports development exercise or a talent development exercise, although talent does improve with the level of competition when you cherry pick the best against the best. 70% of kids drop out, 7 out of every 10 children that do participate. So that 25%, that one boy, 7 out of 10 of them will drop out as they transition to middle school because it's no longer fun, too much pressure, too expensive, coaches are bullies, whatever. There's a number of reasons. And so what you end up is, along that pathway, 2% of 2% of 2% will make it. Again, the costs are increasing for individuals because that is such a drastic fall off in terms of the size of the marketplace, and you have to maintain revenues to keep up with the associated costs. So you have no choice but to charge the same people more and more money. If you come back to sort of what you said about Title IX and collegiate sports, NIL is effectively the undoing of Title IX. On the one hand, that's because what used to be, so first of all, Title IX isn't just men versus women. It's for all sports, so disability sports, female sports, so on and so forth. So if for every dollar you spend on the men's program, the institution spends on the men's program, because they're federally funded or subsidized, they have to spend the same amount on female or disability sports. That's because it's institutional money. NIL allows sponsors and businesses to directly pay players. So that money is no longer coming in directly through the institution, and therefore it's not relevant. Title IX doesn't apply because it's an endorsement. It's no different from the professionals in the NBA or the NFL. Secondarily to that, that is having an impact or a reduction on money that is going to go directly to the institutions via the conferences, and they're negotiating. So Big Ten, Pac-12, or whatever they are now. I know they keep changing the numbers and joining the other one and then going back, the SEC, for example. But ultimately, NIL is seeing money go directly to the players. That's a reduction in institutional money, which therefore that's less or a smaller pool of cash that has to be divided. Excuse me. Then there's a reduction in the institutional money because it's going directly to the players. I might be repeating myself there. But also then employment law is going to supersede what that institutional money is doing. So if you're an engineering school, you're going to pay your engineering professors more than you are someone that's teaching English, because it might not be deemed as important or valuable because there's a greater demand for the science or the maths programs. So it comes down to good old capitalism, supply and demand. If there's a greater demand for certain elements of it, you're going to pay more for the people that provide it. In that sense, the football players no longer, and rightly so, like their hard labor is producing all this revenue, and for years they've never seen any of it, but it's producing the revenue. So you're going and effectively, because you're paying them, you've made them employees of the college. Now, how that contract looks specifically, I couldn't tell you, but ultimately the money directly to the athletes, the reduction in money from the pool, from the conferences and the TV deals and so on. Then the fact that you now have to determine, okay, we have a girls lacrosse program that loses $1 million a year, say, versus a football program that generates 10 million a year. Who's going to get the contracts? Well, you're paid relative to the revenue that you generate. That's as true in the NFL as it is for what's now going to occur in collegiate sports under this new ruling. So, you know, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, showing my age, they were paid the big bucks because people went to watch them. So the lineman isn't paid as much, even though he's protecting that guy, or the running backs aren't paid as much because it's Tom Brady and Peyton Manning that are generating the most revenue, and you're paid accordingly. Excuse me. So what you're going to see happen now, for example, the WNBA is heavily subsidized by the NBA. They lose sort of 40, 50, 60 million a year. Now they're talking about the WNBA generating $1 billion in revenue, going to make money for the first time, new contracts, different things, partly because of Caitlin Clark. But this knock-on effect, you need to produce 1 or 2 Caitlin Clarks every year to grow that league and grow the business. The lack of funding coming directly into those female programs, the lack of scholarships now because it's got to be spread out across things, you're going to see multiple fringe sports cut entirely, second tier, third tier sports, and the remainder are going to struggle financially, and so that changes the whole value proposition for youth sports. Parents, are we going to continue to fund our kid in soccer for travel teams and so on, or basketball, to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars a year, where there's even less chance of getting a scholarship, and that scholarship leading to a professional career in sport, which isn't going to be financially viable. So you'll see less of a demand in youth sports. That's also going to be affected by the transition to high school sports, where funding comes typically through property taxes from the city, so the municipal departments, and however that's sort of worked out. But you're already seeing cuts to sport and the arts in high school budgets. That affects the programs that aren't going to generate revenue and so on. So there's this whole cascade of less money, which ultimately makes it less attractive, and that places the burden again on the parents. So it automatically, there's a glass ceiling, or glass floor rather. The cost, the barrier to entry is raising higher. So not everyone can participate.
Let's drill down on that other point you just made, Michael. We've talked about cost rising as a way of pushing kids out of youth sports. We've talked about now the changes that are occurring at the collegiate level, where we expect to see a reallocation of money to specific sports, which will leave a vacuum or a void in the other sports. And yet there is yet another major factor taking place, which we have to look at as well. In growing up, almost all sports that I would have had a chance to participate in were provided by the public schools. They had a baseball team, or they had a basketball team, or a football team, track and field, golf, all sports offered at the small, relatively rural high school that I went to. And the result of it is that essentially tax dollars were paying for my ability to participate in sports at the high school level. And but what a lot of people are not seeing, but it's very important, is that in the United States, as in most industrial countries around the world, we've seen a declining birth rate. There are fewer kids being born, which means fewer kids are entering the school system. And everybody that I know of has seen school closures in their local cities. Because there aren't enough kids to support all the cost of all the buildings and all the infrastructure that goes along with that. Well, as you might expect, part of that money was going towards these public interscholastic youth sports programs, which are now being cut. And this cutting is occurring at all school levels, from sixth grade elementary all the way up into the collegiate level, because there just isn't enough money to maintain the sport. And so there's less money, meaning that they play less programs, less travel. Then you're getting into questions of safety concern. Are they buying new, safer equipment? Is the old equipment getting outdated, becoming unsafe, and on and on and on. But what this is doing is pushing more kids who want to play sports into club sports, which are a pay-per-play approach, where a club is its own private business. It is offering a service to allow kids to participate in a sport. And the club has to bear the cost. They are a business. They're not a charity, and they have to charge enough to cover all the costs that are there. And then, as often happens these days, there is a need, or maybe there is a questionable need to travel, where you say, well, yeah, my kids played all the kids within our neighborhood, but now we have to travel to East Coast, West Coast, somewhere else to play other kids. And that is, play, participation in the sport is one way to advance talent, but the costs go up astronomically at that point. Not only in out-of-pocket costs, but who's the parent that has a weekend to leave on Friday, come back on Monday to take their kid to play in a tournament that's across the country? Hopefully Michael will be back as we continue to experience some technical challenges. But so what's occurring is we've got costs going up. We have less public money going into sports. We have situations where money that was coming into sports. Michael is back without a camera. Michael, can you hear me? No. Okay. I'll let Michael continue to work on that. But all these factors are pushing kids out of sports. So if we look at all the business models and we start asking ourselves about funding, now that we're into the second half of this hour, we've been looking at all these factors that have contributed to this diminished amount of money coming into youth sports. We had the public programs through the schools. We had the youth programs, which are mostly nonprofit groups who get together with Little League this or that, that are not clubs. But the parents end up paying a fee into a nonprofit group that then tries to provide uniforms, insurance, field rental, other expenses common to that. And the parents are the one who are paying the fees. It's like, my kid's going to play soccer. They're going to be in this particular soccer program, and I have to write a check in order to get my kid subscribed and enrolled in that particular program. Depending upon the program, the parents may be paying everything to that particular program, or they're having to pay an entry fee, and then they have to buy everything that their kid needs. And these youth programs, Michael, at that level, other than the parents paying the fees, how else are these programs possibly funded?
Well, I dropped out there, so I missed about 60 seconds prior to that final 60 seconds, but I know where you're going with that anyway. A lot of it, a lot of these programs are simply funded by milking the parents. Ultimately, it's easier to sell someone a second product once you sold them the first product. You don't have to build a new relationship. You haven't got to establish that relationship, spend time, build trust, so on and so forth. You can just keep selling them something new. So that could be a 12-week season in the spring. Oh, but now we've got this travel program for 6 weeks in the summer. Oh, and then we're doing tournament season in the fall. And on it goes. Beyond that, I developed a framework for all sports organizations of all levels, where I tried to break it down into what revenue streams are available, or what categories of revenues are available for all sports, from the top all the way down to the bottom. I came up with the 6 pillars of revenue. Membership, kit and equipment, concessions, advertising, which is sponsorship, gate receipts, which is if you're ticketing your competition, your matches, and then events. Events is separate because all games are events, but not all events are games. You could do a fundraising barbecue, you could do a concert at a stadium if you're the Broncos, that kind of thing. Most of these programs aren't targeting, not all revenue streams are created equal, and most of it takes an awful lot of work to be able to capture revenues from the other streams other than membership dues. So you can bundle kit and equipment, merchandise, into the participation fee. So that's inflating the cost. Instead of it being $50, it's $500, but you're getting $250 worth of kit and equipment charged at retail, marked up, so there's a margin in there, so that the program can make more money and play more or better coaches. One of the issues there is 70% of all sports coaches in America do not hold a certificate stating the fact that they're qualified as a coach. They played at a certain level. They know about sport. Oh, I was this, I was whatever. But really, what you know about the sport is irrelevant. It's what the kids know about the sport. And that's what coaching is getting them to understand. So really, the value proposition is diminishing all of the time, because the quality of the instruction, the quality of the education to the child is never really being developed. One of the sales techniques in that, is, or we're better than, or we're progressing, this sort of self-fulfilling cycle for competition. So if we're a reputable team and we're doing well in our league, and the following year we recruit more of the best players in the area, you're naturally going to beat everyone else. And that is what they're using to justify, well, now we need the travel team, which is more money, more revenue, more kit, more travel, so on.
But yeah, getting back to funding of the team.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, okay.
So what they then need to do to subsidize this is target sponsorships and so on, but they don't, because sponsorship is viewed as a donation, not a marketing expense. So a lot of the times you'll see a wealthy parent, or the more affluent parents, as these things become more inaccessible financially, the parents are then writing checks because the program has the backup of being a 501c3. But they do very little in terms of true marketing or advertising, producing an ROI for the sponsors. One, that might be not having the wherewithal to be able to do it. Two, they don't really have the eyeballs to be able to leverage that to any benefit to the sponsor. Really, it is just a tax write-off, and so that's kind of the end of the conversation. Excuse me. Nor do a lot of these programs offer any sort of concessions or merchandise at their events. I was at Aurora Sports Park at the weekend with a colleague, and there's thousands of cars in there, so there's a couple thousand kids and parents, and someone else is making money grilling burgers and hot dogs and charging for it. No one's there selling merchandise or any of this other stuff. So it really comes down to they've narrowed in onto, to some extent, this gullible customer that they can keep selling more and better products to. It's it's like upgrading a package on some sort of internet thing, or is it I've got Netflix and then Netflix Plus because now I don't get the commercials. So it's just charging a little bit more or a lot more from the same person for essentially the same product, but you've tiered it in such a way that you can get away with it.
Well, let's take this step back. If you're looking at the pro level, they make their money by selling tickets, where people pay to watch the game in person. They sell media rights, so you can watch the game online through a broadcast internet show. They'll sell merchandise, which is the uniforms and everything associated with the brand of the team. And they will make money off concessions, which is people who show up at the games, buy food and beverage at the games. And so these all represent revenue streams at the pro level. When you step down to amateur sports, or what we're going to call semi-pro sports now, or pro sports at the collegiate level, it's the same model.
Yep.
Tickets get in the stadium, concessions, merchandise. There is then some money coming in from the university because their brand being displayed on national TV helps drive enrollment, which gains tuition. So there's secondary benefits to the college by subsidizing a team at that level. When you get to high school, then now everything's shifted. There may or may not be tickets sold for a game. It may be free, to observe by the public because it's being paid for with public dollars. There is merchandise, but almost little merchandise is sold at that level. The concessions are there, and there's typically little or no TV viewership. So you're limited to revenue to whoever showed up to watch the game on a particular event. But what you're seeing is a diminishing capability of generating revenue because the size of the audience is decreasing. And therefore there's less money to work with that, and so this is why, as Michael and I have been working on new models, we see that there has to be a relationship between the pro team, who's getting the maximum amount of revenue, and the amateur teams, which are essentially their supply chain. This is where the talent's coming from. And so somehow the money that's made at the top level has to be recycled or reallocated in some fashion to the amateur sports teams in order to have a continuing supply of talent coming up through the system. And then obviously when you go down to the lowest level, which would be elementary, middle school, again, smaller crowds, no tickets, not any merchandise sales being made at that point, and so we're at the worst case scenario for funding, which is why parents are bearing the burden of all these costs. But there's a lot of other elements that we think could come into play from a funding standpoint. One of these is, as Michael described, sponsorships, an ability for a business to associate their brand with a team or a league or union or something, where they get a benefit in the form of advertising. And what we've seen, though, is that these businesses are approached for a donation, a charitable donation, where they get little or no exposure, no advertising benefit from putting that money on the table. It's more throwaway money. And the teams have the ability to give those businesses greater visibility to basically compete for their advertising dollars with a more demonstrative, stronger, better organized sponsorship program that serves to benefit the business to the point that they can spend more dollars with a team. But this becomes a skill, a back office challenge, something that is beyond the scope of almost every youth sports program that's out there, where they're struggling just to get a coach, however uncertified, referees, pay for the field rental, and get the kids to the game. There isn't a volunteer that's going to be part of the family group who are parent group that's saying, don't worry about it. I will go out and recruit all the sponsorship dollars we can to lower the cost to the parents. And so what we see as another thing to work towards is to create a tribal brand, as we call it, where the pro teams and all the feeder teams through college, high school, middle school, elementary, are all aligned under a common trademark, which allows the selling of merchandise at multiple levels, which causes more eyeballs, so to speak, on what's happening within this group of players, which will justify larger sponsorship dollars. And so instead of having 1,000 teams their own thing with no commonality, no central back office, no common brand, we see a need to consolidate these almost like a commerce cooperative, where they're all working together with common elements, which will then create an ability to work with sponsors on a professional business level and also then to get into larger dollar amounts, which then lower the cost of parent contributions. Michael also mentioned one other factor, which is that right now everything is decentralized to the point that every team goes out and buys their own uniforms. They're all paying retail prices for these uniforms, for kit and equipment, for insurance, and so forth. And this means that they're paying typically the highest price that exists in the marketplace. There is no discounting or reduction of cost from centralized buying. So we see a need to create that co-op type of purchasing power where everybody can get the best price available that's out there. And this can significantly reduce the cost to the parents at the same time. So one is cost cutting, the other is revenue generating, and doing it within a system that is in effect regenerative, meaning that if there is a concession, if that's all the money's going to a concessionaire and none of it's coming back into the team, to the league, to the tribe, then that money is basically these people are living parasitically, not negatively, but parasitically off of all the work and effort of all the parents to put on all the programs. And the question was why is that profit from that type of revenue stream not coming back in to the system as a whole? Michael refers to this as the sports totality, which is that every element of the ecosystem is designed to work with each other from a revenue standpoint, which again reduces cost, increases revenue, and creates a better model altogether. So, Michael, with looking at the challenges that exist, it seems that there are ways to make improvements to adjust to the new situation in the marketplace and help lower the cost of youth sports participation. Are there other things that you think that should be looked at, other things that should be considered?
Yeah, first and foremost, the thing that you're talking about in terms of the sports totality or collectively bargaining for purchasing and revenue growth and so on, that comes from W.C. Neal, who's an economist in the 60s, and so it's not a new idea. This is what fundamentally makes the NFL so successful. But he says sporting monopoly is more profitable than sporting competition, though it can be said economic collusion among sporting competitors is the most profitable of all. So a sporting competitor, that could be different baseball teams in a baseball league. It could be a baseball or a soccer team in the same city because they're competing against each other to sell memberships, to get more participation and so on. But ultimately, if they work together, they lower cost and increase revenue together. In between lies the margin of profit, which we want to redistribute. Alongside of that, part of our idea and our belief is that because of that glass floor being so high right now, there's going to be a lot of people priced out of it. So we want to offer scholarships, and one of the ways that we can supplement that, we talked about part of the profit distribution going to foundation, Citizen Sports Foundation, which would offer scholarships to those that were more economically challenged, disadvantaged, particularly with at-risk groups. And part of that is then wanting to partner with municipalities who typically the Parks and Rec department are a major expense and lose money every year. One particular, the city shall remain unnamed, but their budget deficit is projected at $25 million, and 70% of that is the Parks and Rec department, which to me is crazy. But anyway, alongside of that, in terms of the profit feedback to provide scholarships, we talked about lotteries, raffles, 50-50s, and again, so having the ability to receive donations in terms of prizes. It could be a vacation, it could be a car. That's another layer of sponsorships and marketing that we can deliver to partner corporations. But essentially, then generating revenue from the sale of raffle tickets that in turn creates more profit to provide subsidies and scholarships to participants based on their economic status. So they might get 25% scholarship all the way up to 100% scholarship, just depending on their ability to pay fees and become part of the programming and the ecosystem. But essentially, it's finding a way for everyone to contribute according to their ability to do so, and making sure that if they are struggling in certain areas, that it becomes more affordable and more accessible using scholarships because of the profit and the raffle profit via the foundation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point that at the end of the day, no matter how well you may be able to organize sports into a collective, into a co-op to reduce cost and increase revenue, there still will be kids whose parents cannot afford to put them into sports.
Yep.
So, as one of the last parts of this is that there has to be a hardwired intentional set aside of a portion of the profits from the operation of pro sports and all the collective teams underneath of a pro team to be cycled back in specifically to pay for the cost of those families who cannot afford the price, no matter how low it's been pushed down through this collective. So that requires its own infrastructure. It requires having a charitable organization paired with the for-profit organization. But and then, as you also pointed out, though, that municipalities have their own youth programs, and that this becomes it becomes a public-private partnership where you have a private entity that's coordinating, organizing everything within a basically a stack of different players within a sport. You're going to have a charity who is taking a percentage of the profits, the revenue from that, and pushing it into getting more kids into the sport. And then you have a city who needs youth programs for a variety of reasons, who can help contribute to parks and recreation, fields of play, different types of youth programs that sports can address as a activity, a way of dealing with that. So we've just defined an extraordinarily complicated ecosystem, which explains why this is not going to happen naturally. It's going to require a number of people to step up as champions to basically engage in innovative, hopefully disruptive business practices to rewrite how funding occurs in amateur sports, and ultimately impact everything up to the pro sports leagues and teams around the world. So looking forward to this adventure. I think we're going to find a lot of interesting allies along the way to rewriting the book on sports funding. And I also expect we're going to have a lot of pushback from people who are continuing to advocate for failed business models that are not working, will not work going into the future. But that's what they know. That's where they've been, and we all have a tendency to try to go forward based upon what we've experienced in the past. So, last comments, any last statement that you'd like to provide with us today when we talk about sports funding and the future of sports funding?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to this. If you want something to grow, keep feeding it. So if we're trying to raise the height of the pyramid, and to do so stably and sustainably, we need to widen the base. One, that increases the talent pool. Two, it increases the fan base. Three, that feedback loop for funding and the scholarship side of piece is necessary. So the fact that no one's doing that already is, it just seems so obvious to me. Like I said, if you want something to grow, keep feeding it rather than creating this shaky tower. At the end of the day, they'll be stood there at the end of it going Jenga, because it's all collapsed around them. There are limitations to what people can afford, and with the economy the way it is and things like that, you know, sacrifices are made, and I'd rather the kid eat than play sport.
Yeah, I mean,
That's what the parents are deciding.
Yeah, they refer to this as the great sports divide right now between the parents who can afford to put their kids in sports and those who can't. And it will reach a breaking point. It's already contributing to either a diminishment, a reduction in size, a reduction of quality of sports through the school systems and now into the colleges. And to some degree directly impacting sports at the pro level and at the national team level today.
Yep.
So we do expect changes. We'd like for them to be more positive rather than negative. But anyone who's interested in the whole concept of sports funding, you can reach out to me at my email address, which has just been added to the screen here at kdakin@dakincapital.com. We're very interested in anyone who wants to build new sustainable sports ecosystems so that we have more kids participating in sports going forward. So thank you, Michael, for being on the show today. I appreciate you being the guest. I think this is a very important and very dynamic topic that we're talking about. We'll probably come back here in the near future and talk about some of the different ways that we are trying to address this particular challenge. So thank you to everyone who is in the audience today, anyone who happens to see this by viewing it later on YouTube or LinkedIn. Again, you're welcome to contact me, and we'll see what we can do to make a difference here. Thank you, everyone.